So now I'm going to go through and demonstrate the technique for answering the logical reasoning questions. Now, there's a number of ways that they can ask the logical reasoning questions, and I'm going to demonstrate two techniques that you can utilize regardless of how they ask the question. So I've extracted two examples from the presentation slide, and I'm going to go through them one at a time now and demonstrate each of the techniques. So the first example, if a woman was G years old, H years ago, how many years old will she be J years from now? And you can see that there's a number of possible answers. So the first technique I'm going to teach you is essentially going to make the question easier to interpret, and therefore it's going to be faster and easier to get the answer. So what you're going to do is insert numbers above the letters. So if a woman was G years old, we're just going to make that 10 years old. H years ago, just make that a 5. How many years old will she be? Make that 20. 20 years from now. And they're just random numbers that I've put above those letters. But now if we look at the question, it's a lot easier to answer. So if a woman was 10 years old 5 years ago, well, 10 years ago she was 5 years old, which means she's now 15, which is 5 plus 10. How many years old will she be 20 years from now? Well, if we know that she's 15 years old now, 20 years from now she's going to be 35. So if we look at the answers, it's just J plus G plus H. 10 plus 5 equals 15, plus 20 equals 35, J plus G plus H. So the answer is A, so you select A and move on. So the first technique, if it's quite a complicated question, is just to insert numbers. Makes it easier to interpret the information and therefore easier to answer. So the second technique, I'll demonstrate through example 2. Jess is older than Tony. Roger is older than Jess. Tony is older than Roger. If the first two statements are true, the third statement is true, false, or not enough information. So the fastest way to work these out is just to put the names down in an order. So Jess is older than Tony, so you can just even shorten it by putting a J. So Jess is older than Tony, so you put Jess in front of Tony. Roger is older than Jess. Well, Roger is older than Jess, so you put Roger in front of Jess. And Tony is older than Roger. Well, Tony is actually younger than Roger because he's behind Roger. So you can see if the first two statements are true, the third statement is false because Tony is not older than Roger, he's younger. So the answer would be false. So that's the second technique. And you can obviously minimize time by just writing the first letter of the names if they're different. If their name was, say, Jess and Jason, you just write out the name. So that's another way of trying to reduce the time to answer these questions. So there's two techniques which make these logical reasoning questions easy to answer, and you can utilize those techniques depending on the way they ask the question.